A very good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Moran, and I am president of the Irish American Bar Association of New York. And on behalf of the board of directors of the Bar Association, I would like to welcome you all to this evening's program. We are very excited to have John Kropp join us tonight. John, founder of Mindfulness for Lawyers, graduated from Harvard Law School and Brown University. After law school, John clerked in the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and worked as a litigator at public interest law firms in Los Angeles and New York City. John has taught mindfulness at Harvard, Yale, and the Pentagon, and more than 50 top law firms. John has practiced mindfulness since 2006 and has studied with teachers from around the world, including psychologists, neuroscientists, and traditional Buddhist masters. In 2014, John completed a 7-month silent meditation retreat. So it is our great privilege to have John with us for this important program at this unsettling time in our world. And tonight's program wouldn't be possible without the very generous sponsorship of our sponsors, KeyBank and Laurel Road. And so before we get underway with John, I would like to hand over to Carol and Paul now for a word from our sponsors.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. Carol, I guess I'll go first and then turn it over to you quickly. But really appreciate you having us involved tonight. If you don't know Laurel Road, we are a student loan refinance company that was purchased by KeyBank back in April of last year. And student loan debt is a huge problem in the country. And it's specifically a problem in the law community with what you may know is 132,000 law students are enrolled in the US each year, but what you might not know is the average law school debt coming out of school is over 145,000. And also, our research shows that over 56% of attorneys have postponed buying a home because of their student debt. So it's really impacting lawyers' lives, and we actually have a no-cost solution that could help your organization, both for you individually and your organizations, to increase your productivity and retention, so you don't have to worry about this. So please feel free to reach out to me. Michael will know how to get in touch with me too, if Laurel Road could be of assistance to you and KeyBank overall. And now Carol will talk a little bit about our parent company and how we fit into this.
Absolutely, thank you. So I just want to thank everyone on behalf of KeyBank for letting us be a part of this. I think it's wonderful to invest your time in mindfulness. Again, given this time, especially as Michael said, KeyBank is also very much committed to overall wellness, not only of our employees, but obviously of all of our partners and customers as well. A little bit about KeyBank, if you're not familiar, we are a Fortune 500 company. We're headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio, and we're the 12th largest commercial bank. But we're a lot more than just a bank, and hopefully at some point, if you reach out to Paul or Derek, you can find out about many of the things that Key brings to the table, Laurel Road being a part of that. But generally, I would say think of Key as sort of your lifestyle partner. And thank you again for giving us this opportunity to sponsor. So really appreciate it. Okay, Michael.
Thank you both. All right, so let's get underway. John, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm really glad to be here with you tonight. And so what I wanted to do today, we have just a short time together. What I wanted to do was to kind of share what I think of as some greatest hits practices, short, bite-sized, actually doable for a busy legal professional, but nonetheless quite powerful and useful for dealing with things like stress, anxiety, difficult emotions. And frankly, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time. Oh, let me put up the slides while I'm yapping. There we go. Can someone just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides all right? Hey, all right. You can still see them now? Perfect. All right. So like I said, I don't think I need to spend too much time on why I'm talking about stress, anxiety, difficult emotions. I think we're all too aware, on top of the stress and challenges that just come from being in the legal field, right? I personally found being a lawyer very rewarding, but it was stressful. Stakes are high, deadlines are tight. It's adversarial, of course. And then there's everything else that's happening right now. So let's not spend too much time on that. And let me cut to what I can do to help. And what I want to start with is, in particular, anxiety. Okay. And at the outset, I just want to say that if you're experiencing levels of anxiety that are making it hard to function or threatening your mental health, don't try to handle that on your own. Okay. Please do see a mental health professional. But having said that, let's talk about anxiety. And it's normal and even healthy to have some anxiety now and then. That's okay. The problem is when our anxiety gets out of control. And, we can't change the fact that we are living in anxiety-provoking times, but we can change our own internal response. So let's focus on that for the moment. Now, I just want to note before I go any further, if you have questions, I think, someone can correct me if you don't think this is the best approach, but I think it's perfectly okay to just put them in the chat. And then I'll take a look and answer the questions at the end. You don't have to wait to the end to put them in. Just put them in whenever it occurs to you. I'll take a look at the end. If you'd like to be anonymous, I think it should be possible to send a chat just to me, a private chat. And if you do that, then I will read out your question at the end, but I won't read who it came from. Okay? So let's get back into anxiety. Now, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but basically, anxiety manifests in two big ways: unpleasant sensations in your body and negative thoughts in your mind. And if you think about your own experiences of anxiety, that probably sounds kind of familiar, right? You've got negative thoughts racing through your head, and you've also got a knot in your stomach, right? That doesn't feel good, or a tightness in your chest that doesn't feel good. That's how anxiety manifests: unpleasant body sensations, negative thoughts. Now, the good news is there is a way to respond to these manifestations of anxiety that renders them relatively harmless. And it's actually not that hard to do. The bad news is that we don't usually do that. Our instinct is to do the opposite and to respond to anxiety in ways that fuel it or prolong it. So how do we usually respond to anxiety, and how should we be responding to anxiety? Well, in a nutshell, we respond to anxiety and its manifestations by getting involved with them. And we should respond by leaving them alone. Now, let me break that down. So when anxious body sensations arise, our instinct is to get involved by fighting them. Now, that might mean trying not to feel them. That might mean trying to change them. But in either case, we are fighting. We're getting involved. And then when negative thoughts arise, our instinct is to get involved by engaging with them. Now, that can mean arguing with the thoughts. It can mean buying into the thoughts. But either way, you are engaging with them. And when we engage with our negative thoughts, when we fight our anxious body sensations, when we get involved in these ways, we usually just make these things worse, right? It amplifies this reaction. So what should we do instead? Well, we should leave them alone. Okay? Now, what that means is that when anxious body sensations arise, you notice them, you feel them, but you don't fight them. You just let them be there with no expectation that they'll go away. Now, you might hear that and think, well, hold up. The whole point is that I want these things to go away, right? And fair enough. But here's the thing. If you don't amplify your anxious body sensations by fighting them, you'll probably find that they're not such a big deal. And they don't really get in the way as you go about your day. But if you do try to make those sensations go away, then you will amplify them. And then they can start to interfere with your day-to-day life and your well-being. Okay? So here's one way that you might think about it. If you insist on having no anxiety, you're going to have a lot. If you make your peace with having a little anxiety, you'll have only a little. Okay? Now, what about negative thoughts? What does it mean to leave them alone? Well, what it means is that you don't engage with their content. You don't take them as true. You don't argue with them. You don't ruminate. You just notice that a thought has arisen and keep going about your day. Okay. And this, by the way, is one way to think about mindfulness. Mindfulness is a sort of clear awareness of what's arising in your experience without getting involved, without necessarily engaging with the content. Okay. And this is the essence of working with anxiety. Instead of getting involved, leave it alone. So when anxious body sensations come up, you just let them be there with no expectation that they'll go away. When negative thoughts come up, you notice them mindfully, but you don't engage with their content. Now, this isn't a zero anxiety solution, right? It involves letting this stuff be there, but it is the best solution available, and it can offer a lot of relief, okay? So now that you have the basic principle, which I think is important, I want to share some simple techniques that you can use to put that principle into practice and to work with anxiety, right? The first technique is called noting. And here's how it works. Whatever is standing, this is a classic mindfulness technique, by the way, noting. So the way that this works is whatever is standing out in your awareness in any given moment, you just apply a mental label to it. And we call that mental label a note, hence noting. So if what's drawn your attention is something in your field of vision, then you note seeing, which means you say the word in your mind, not out loud, but you say the word seeing, okay? If what's standing out is a sound, you note hearing. If it's a body sensation, you will note feeling. And if it's a mental object, a thought, a memory, a mental image, any sort of mental object, you're going to note thinking, okay? Seeing, hearing, feeling, thinking. So to practice noting, you just check in and see moment to moment what's standing out in my awareness right now. And at a relaxed pace, maybe once every few seconds, you just note and then note and then note. Seeing, hearing, feeling, or thinking. Okay, so if I were to do this out loud, instead of in my head, it might look something like this. Hearing, feeling, feeling, thinking, hearing, seeing, seeing, see, just like that, okay? Now this method, this noting practice, is often done as a formal meditation technique where you actually sit down, you set a timer, and then you will note, right? Seeing, thinking, the way that I just did. But today, I want to teach noting as a sort of on-the-go practice that you can keep in your back pocket for dealing with anxiety. Now, I gave you a whole menu of notes, seeing, hearing, feeling, thinking, but the most important notes when it comes to anxiety are going to be thinking and feeling. Because as we discussed, the big manifestations of anxiety are unpleasant body sensations, that's feeling, and negative thoughts, that's thinking. And when you note feeling, when a body sensation comes up, you're not fighting the sensation. You are just observing its presence, right? And when you note thinking for a negative thought, you're not engaging with its content, right? Likewise, you are just observing its presence. So noting shifts us into a helpful mode of neutral observation rather than the mode of getting involved, which is what we tend to do and what causes us problems with anxiety. Now, I've found that a quick noting session is really powerful when my anxiety is starting to spike, okay? So, you know, for me, that would have been the times, right, when I had to stand up and argue in court. I was a litigator. So when I was in those situations, I would just close my eyes and start to note when I'm really feeling this anxiety. And then that knot in my stomach, the pounding of my heart, all of that stuff just becomes feeling. And then I don't amplify them and I don't get overwhelmed by them. And then, anxious thoughts like, I'm going to mess this up, I'm going to embarrass myself, this is going to be terrible. Those anxious thoughts just become thinking. And then I don't buy into their content. So this is a super helpful technique. So I thought what we'd do is just try a minute of noting together, okay? So you don't have to adopt any fancy posture. You can just sit comfortably in your chair. You don't even need to close your eyes. And so when I ring the bell, you'll just check in and see moment to moment what's standing out in my awareness right now. And then at a relaxed pace, just note, and then note, and then note, maybe once every few seconds. Seeing, hearing, feeling, or thinking. Let's try that together now. Okay. I hope the bell sound came through through the video chat. Doesn't always come through perfectly, but I hope you're able to hear it. So that was noting. And like I said, useful technique. This is one of my main mindfulness practices. And like I said, this is my favorite thing to do if my anxiety is really starting to spike. So this is a good technique to have in your toolkit. All right, so now the next technique I want to share is called Am I Sure That's True? And this is something that I've adapted from cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay, so here's the idea. We have a tendency to take our thoughts as true, to assume that they are accurate representations of reality, when actually very often our thoughts are distorted or even just straight up false. And so this technique is a really easy way to break that tendency we have so we don't get as pulled in by our anxious thoughts and assume them to be true. So here's what you do. The next time you find yourself caught up in an anxious thought, just ask the question, am I sure that's true? That's it. Am I sure that's true? And that can often be enough to break the hold that the anxious thought has on you. And if that isn't quite enough, which sometimes it isn't, there are some follow-up questions you can ask as a part of this method. So here are some examples. What evidence do I have that this thought is true? Are there any assumptions hidden in that thought? Is there an alternative thought, an alternative scenario that's just as plausible? So those are follow-up questions. And if you ask those, that can add a little more power to the technique if needed, instead of just saying, am I sure that's true? So that's it. That's a really simple technique. That's the whole thing. And by the way, if you ever want to try a fuller, more formal version of this technique that they actually use in cognitive behavioral therapy, you can download an app that will walk you through that process. And those apps are actually pretty good. So I have one on my iPhone that I like. It's called Quirk CBT, Q-U-I-R-K, CBT. And then on Android, there's an app called What's Up that's very similar. So you might take a look at those. They sort of walk you through this process actually with a little bit more fullness and formality. Okay. Now, the last technique I want to teach you specifically around anxiety is called vagus breathing, okay? And this is a style of breathing that activates a certain cranial nerve called the vagus nerve, which then activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your so-called rest and digest system, and triggers a relaxation response. So stimulating the vagus nerve can have a really powerful calming effect on the body and the mind. So how does that work? Well, it's really simple, actually. All you do is you slow the rate of your breathing. So human beings take on average 10 to 14 breaths per minute. And if you just slow that down to 5 to 7 breaths per minute, or even slower if you like, that will stimulate the vagus nerve and trigger this relaxation response. And if you just count roughly 5 seconds on the inhale, you don't have to look at a clock or anything, just roughly 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, that will basically get you there. And then of course you can go even more slowly if you prefer. And when you're doing vagus breathing, what you want to do is try to make sure that it's not just your chest that's expanding, but also your lower abdomen. And you might even put a hand on your stomach while you do the vagus breathing to make sure that it's expanding outward when you breathe. All right, so let's just try 30 seconds or a minute of vagus breathing. So when I hit the bell, just slow your breathing. You can do roughly 5 seconds on the inhale, roughly 5 seconds on the exhale, or slower than that if you like. Some people, actually a lot of people, find that it feels natural and enhances the practice if you make your exhale a little slower than your inhale. So you could play with that too as an option. So now let's try a little bit of vagus breathing together. Okay, so that was vagus breathing. And like I said, this is a really useful technique to have. I don't know of a technique that is this simple, just slow your breathing down, and yet this effective for calming your mind, calming your body, stopping the stress response, and helping you deal with anxiety. So this one's kind of a no-brainer to use. And that is going to close the sort of anxiety section of this program. And I wanted to devote a fair amount of time to that because we do create so much unnecessary suffering for ourselves when we don't know how to work with our anxiety, our uncomfortable experiences, our negative emotions. But all that said, it is nice to experience positive emotions when they come around, right? Positive emotions feel good. So yes, it's important to learn how to work skillfully with negative emotions, but if there are easy, effective ways to cultivate positive emotions, it would be silly not to do those, right? So that's what we'll be talking about now. What we're going to do is explore, here, let me get rid of the slides for a second so you can just look at me. Slides aren't really important at this exact moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore 2 mental habits that research has shown to increase the experience of positive emotions and to cultivate overall well-being, okay? And then I'll share some simple strategies for cultivating those mental habits. So those 2 mental habits that I want to talk about are gratitude and goodwill, okay? Kind of convenient that they both start with the letter G, makes them easy to remember. So gratitude and goodwill. Now, when it comes to these habits, we've sort of lucked out in 2 ways that I can see. So one is that these habits are relatively easy to develop, So these are low-hanging fruit. The benefits are kind of easy to obtain. And then the other way in which we're lucky is that gratitude and goodwill are the sorts of qualities that we associate with being a good person, right? People with those qualities make other people feel good. They treat people well. People like spending time with them. So I think it's really wonderful that the same mental habits that bring us happiness and well-being also turn us into the sort of person who brings other people happiness and well-being. So let's get into these mental habits a little bit, and let's start with gratitude. Now, research suggests that gratitude has a massive impact on mental health and well-being. In fact, there's some indication that among emotional states, gratitude is perhaps uniquely correlated with well-being. So studies suggest that grateful people are happier, less stressed, and less prone to anxiety or depression. They cope more effectively with problems, they're more satisfied with their relationships, and apparently they even sleep better. And the good news is, it is actually possible to cultivate the quality of gratitude, the habit of gratitude. And you can do this through practice, just like exercising a muscle. So I'd like to share two simple methods for doing that. Both of these methods come from Dr. Martin Seligman, the great founder of positive psychology, the former president of the American Psychological Association. Now, the first method, and you may have heard of this one, is to keep a gratitude journal. Now, I cannot recommend this practice enough. It is easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of time, but Dr. Seligman and other researchers have found that it brings powerful benefits that last a long time. So, and I should also just note that keeping a gratitude journal has been incredibly beneficial for me personally. So I do this. And here's how you do it. Here's how you keep a gratitude journal. At the end of each day, write down 3 things that went well that day. That's it. So each one could be just a sentence if that's all you feel like writing. Now, if you want to add a little bit of extra power to the gratitude journal, it is even more effective if, in addition to the 3 things that went well, you also write down why each of those good things happened. So, for example, if one of your 3 things is, I cooked a great meal with my family today, then your reason why that happened might be because we made an effort to find activities that we could all enjoy together, right? So you'd write down that reason as well. Now, if you keep up this gratitude journal practice, it will actually rewire your brain so that you become more prone to noticing and appreciating the positive things in your life and less prone to focusing on, dwelling on the negative things. And by the way, I actually do this practice a little bit differently. Now, this is not sanctioned by Dr. Seligman, but what I do is I keep a real-time gratitude journal. So instead of doing it at the end of the day, I have a list that I keep in the Notes app on my phone. And whenever something good happens to me, I just pull out my phone and I immediately put in the note, I write down that good thing. So I don't wait, I just do it in real time in my phone. And I also don't limit myself to 3 things. Whenever a good thing happens to me, whether it was 7 things, 9 things that day, I write it down in my phone. So real-time gratitude journal. Now, this might just be me, but my sense is that for me, doing the gratitude journal that way in real time has been even better at training me to appreciate the good things in life as they're actually happening. So that's the gratitude journal, okay? The second practice that I want to share around gratitude is called the gratitude visit. Now, this usually involves visiting someone in person, and obviously we're quite a bit constrained in our ability to do that right now, given quarantine and everything. So I suggest just modifying it to be a gratitude video chat or a gratitude phone call instead of a gratitude visit, okay? And here's how you do it. You think of someone who has shown you incredible kindness in your life, preferably someone you've never fully thanked. write that person a short letter expressing your gratitude toward them. So you'll write down what this person did for you, how it affected you, how it made your life better, how that made you feel, and don't hold back. Really express the full measure of your gratitude toward this person. Then reach out to that person and say that you'd like to have a video chat or a phone call with them. And you don't have to explain why. You can just say there's something you want to talk to them about, or you could just say you'd like to catch up. And then on your video chat or on your phone call, tell them that you have something you'd like to read to them, and then just read the letter aloud. Now, I should warn you, there is a pretty decent chance that someone will cry because this practice actually can be very affecting, very powerful. So just a heads up on that. So now you know 2 methods for cultivating this healthy mental habit of gratitude. And as between the 2, the research indicates that the gratitude visit leads to a higher boost in happiness, while the gratitude journal has benefits that are longer lasting. So they each have their own advantage, but the good news is that you don't really have to choose, right? You can do both. So those are the practices that I wanted to share around gratitude. Now let's move on to goodwill. And when I say goodwill, I'm referring to a quite specific mental state. And that state is the heartfelt wish for others to be happy. That's what I mean when I say goodwill. And as far as I know, the first people to identify that specific state and to systematically explore it were the early Indian Buddhists about 2,500 years ago. And they gave this state the name metta, M-E-T-T-A, metta, the heartfelt wish for others to be happy. Now, for whatever reason, the word metta is often translated into English with the word loving kindness, but actually metta, the more accurate translation would be something like goodwill or friendliness. So I just call it goodwill, which I find rolls off the tongue easier anyway than loving kindness. So I just call it goodwill. Now, those early Buddhists found that through certain forms of mindfulness meditation practice, it's possible to cultivate this state of goodwill and to actually increase your capacity for goodwill. And that if you do that, you become less prone to negative emotions like anger, frustration, hostility, impatience. The way that you treat people starts to change for the better, and your own happiness, your own well-being increase. Now, in recent years, scientists have actually studied these goodwill meditation practices and found that the benefits are very real. Okay? The research indicates that these practices decrease depressive symptoms, they increase your experience of positive emotions, and they appear to improve overall well-being even when you're confronted with the distress of others. And also, I think given how often we in the legal profession are confronted with the distress of others, right, opposing counsel, clients, etc., this is a very useful thing for us. So this idea of goodwill meditation, cultivating this quality of metta, of goodwill, this is a great example of how taking an interest in other people's well-being is good for your own well-being. And actually, the Dalai Lama puts this really beautifully. He likes to say, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish. Care for others. So, I would love to share a sort of full goodwill meditation, but we don't really have time for that in this short session. If you ever Google metta meditation, M-E-T-T-A, you can find some guided full meditations online. Oh, and I'm also going to give you, at the end of this, I'm going to make available a sort of bundle of digital materials, videos that I've recorded on mindfulness and meditation, my recommended book list, my recommended app, some guided meditations, audio meditations that I've recorded. And in there is a full formal metta practice, goodwill meditation. So you can check that out if you want to do the full practice. But I do want to share a quick on-the-go version of the goodwill meditation, okay, that you can use in your day-to-day life. Now, this is very easy to do. whenever you encounter people, in person or virtually, take a moment to silently wish them well by just saying in your mind, may you be happy. That's it. May you be happy. You just say that silently. So if you log on to a video meeting for work and you have a moment before you need to start talking, or if there's a pause during the meeting, you could take that moment to just silently say, may you be happy. Or if you're looking out your window and you see someone on the street, may you be happy, right? Just get in the habit of, almost as a reflex, silently wishing people well, friends, family members, strangers, and that will cultivate this healthy habit of goodwill, of metta. And again, if you want to try the full version, the formal meditation, I'll show you how to grab that at the end of this program. And I'll just mention to you, if you're curious what the full practice looks like, it's a bit more systematic. The way that it works is you use certain phrases. You know how I said, may you be happy? You actually use a set of different phrases. So it's a little more elaborate as a way of wishing well to other people. And you systematically wish well to certain types of people. You start with someone that you really love. You bring that person to mind and wish them well. You move on to people you feel more neutrally towards, acquaintances, colleagues, wish them well. And then eventually you move on to wishing well to people you've had difficulties with, okay? Now, again, you'll be able to check that out, the full version, in the bundle that I'll make available at the end. So I want to leave some time for Q&A. We're getting close. So I'll just leave you with this, okay? There's been a lot of emphasis in recent years on the idea of self-care, right? And self-care absolutely is important, especially now. But isn't it amazing, though, and kind of beautiful, that one of the best ways to practice self-care might be to cultivate caring for others? Leave you with that. So let's take questions if there are any. Actually, before I do that, let me show you how to get this digital bundle, okay? And if you have questions and you haven't put them into the chat yet, please feel free to do so now. And if there are any, I'll answer them. So really quickly, here's how you can get that digital bundle that I was talking about. You just send a text, okay? And you're just gonna text the word mindful to the number 66866. So the phone number you're sending it to is 66866. The message is just the word mindful. It will ask for your email address, and then it'll email you those resources. Those videos that I was talking about, those guided meditations, my recommended book list, my favorite books on mindfulness and meditation, my favorite app, my favorite places you can find free online videos on the topic, all that stuff. Now, it'll also add you to my mailing list. And if you don't want to be on my mailing list, you can just unsubscribe right there. Though you might want to be on my mailing list because I send some useful stuff sometimes. That's totally up to you. So I will leave that up so you can grab that if you want. And now let me just ask, does anyone have questions? And I'll pull up the chat. Let's see. I'm really intrigued. Okay, so hi, John, this is great. I am really intrigued by the vagus breathing idea. So is there really something to when people say, just take a deep breath? Yes, exactly right. So that is not a BS thing to tell someone. It can be a little infuriating in the moment when someone is upset to tell them, hey, why don't you take a deep breath? But yes, taking a deep breath, or more accurately, taking a slow breath, really does do something. Now, it's a little, okay, so let me get back to that in a second. I just noticed that folks said, can you send those resources can you access those resources from outside of America? I'm in Ireland and the text failed to send. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, in Ireland, I know I had folks from the UK try and access it, and instead they got a message from a psychic hotline. That was not me. So instead, please just email me. I'm going to put my email into the chat right now. That's my email address, john@mindfulnessforlawyers.com. If the texting thing, if you're outside the US, email me and I'll send you those resources. All right, so back to this idea of taking a deep breath. Yeah, so mindfulness practices like noting, like things like that, like metta practice, these work with the mind. Vagus breathing is a little different because it's actually working with the body. It is a purely physiological way of calming yourself. You calm your mind, calm your emotional state by working with the body. And it really is as simple as slow your breathing a little bit and try and breathe from the belly, not just from the chest. If you do that and you do a few breaths like that, it stimulates the vagus nerve, you'll feel it. You'll feel yourself start to settle. You might notice your heart rate start to slow down. So yes, very real. Let's see. Where does exercise fit into this? So I think exercise it's not really my area of expertise, and I could certainly be in better shape, but I do know that there's research suggesting that exercise is also something of a magic pill for boosting your mood and sort of busting stress. So you should absolutely exercise. Physical exercise is really good for your mental state, your mental health, your well-being. You can also exercise mindfully, where instead of just sort of ruminating while you exercise, you bring your attention to the felt experience in your body of your movements. You feel your feet slapping against the pavement as you run, right? Or you feel your muscles contracting as you lift the weight. There's a way of using the physical sensations of exercise as an anchor for your attention. And then that actually becomes a form of mindfulness practice. Let's see. Was there a wake-up moment that started your practice on mindfulness? So the reason I got into mindfulness was because I was in law school. It was my first year of law school, and I was stressed out of my mind. I also have ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And so I was at a pretty competitive law school, and I just felt like I was having trouble keeping my head above water. Everyone else seemed so organized, so focused, so disciplined. I didn't feel like I was any of those things. And so I got into meditation and mindfulness for really mercenary reasons. You know, I wanted my grades to go up. And they did, actually. They went up substantially after I started meditating. But then, of course, once I sort of got into it, once I tasted it, it became clear that the benefits went so much deeper than that. But that was actually what got me into that. Let's see. And by the way, if you got to go because we're at time, that's no problem at all. I just see one more question here, so I'm going to answer it. And to everyone saying thanks, no, thank you. It is really my pleasure to be here. Does this help with public speaking anxiety? It actually does. I even have a workshop that I've taught at some of my law firm clients called Painless Public Speaking. So like I said, the noting practice is something that I would do before I had to engage in public speaking. So before I had to stand up and argue a motion. Now, I was just an associate, so I wasn't doing a ton of motion practice, oral argument, but I didn't do none. I did do some. And doing a little bit of noting before I had to stand up, I would do some before I went into the courtroom, and then I would do some sort of before showtime, and it would really help a lot. And actually, when I was new to this line of work that I do now, which is actually teaching mindfulness to legal professionals, which involves a ton of public speaking, when I first started out, I was a very nervous public speaker. And so I would use my own techniques. You know, I would use noting, vagus breathing as a way to settle myself down before I had to speak. So yes. All right, so I'm going to stop the share here. And that's everything that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions that come up down the line and you'd like to ask me, my email is in the chat. Please consider me a resource. Don't hesitate to drop me a line. I like talking about this stuff, so it's not any sort of imposition. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, John. That was a really tremendous presentation, very meaningful. So we appreciate it very much, and I'm sure that our sponsors really enjoyed it as well. Thanks to everybody who took time out this evening to be with the Irish American Bar Association. We greatly appreciate your time, and we hope that you can join us for another virtual event very soon. So I wish you all a very nice evening and a good rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, John.